Should you sell all of your real estate for Bitcoin? Today, we're going to be exploring the question about, is Bitcoin digital property? Lots of people have called it digital property. So let's actually compare it to property by looking at three of the most important comparisons I think we should be looking at. The first is probably the most important, or probably the most requested, okay? And that is, of course, price. Today, we're going to have a look at real estate priced in Bitcoin. So I have this really cool little chart right here. This is the median, so the average American home priced in Bitcoin. So this is a brilliant website. It's called Priced in Bitcoin 21. And I've actually nested myself within the chart of the US median home price priced in Bitcoin. And you can see the trend is pretty clear. It is down and to the right, okay? You can see that in the past 5 years, the average American home has lost 79% of its value measured against Bitcoin, okay? And it doesn't matter what time frame you look at, real estate is getting absolutely trashed against Bitcoin. And that is because Bitcoin is the best performing asset for the past, 3 years in human history of 2023, of 2024. Bitcoin really is the best performing asset in history. Now we're going to play around with this chart a little bit because I want to show you a few things. This is on log scale. Okay, so this chart here takes you all the way back to 2011. So it doesn't actually show you the magnitude of the outperformance that Bitcoin has seen. When you take this off log scale, you can actually see that, since 2014, real estate has, it looks like it's been flatlining, but that is because it's lost a whole lot of value. Okay, so another thing I want to check out here is actually put the fiat price of it on the chart. So you can see that the green line is measuring the new home price of real estate, and you can see it only goes up. Okay, so we can see in 2011, the price of a new home was around $220,000. Today, the average median home is somewhere around $420,000, $430,000. But look at what happens when you price that home in Bitcoin. It trends towards zero, okay? All assets are trending towards zero when measured against Bitcoin. But some people might say, okay, maybe this is just the, US housing market. What happens if we actually look at some other housing markets that might have actually performed better? Well, I'm glad you asked, because today we're going to look at the UK housing market measured against Bitcoin. The UK does have a historically bigger housing bubble than the US does today in 2023. And we can see similar story. Home prices are essentially trending to zero against Bitcoin. So we can see here in the past 5 years, UK home prices have lost 82% of their value against Bitcoin. Year to date, 62% in the past year. Okay, so again, it doesn't matter how you cut this cookie. Economically, the first thing we're going to look at today, the economic argument. Bitcoin is superior economically. It is easily the best bet you can make. Before we move on and have a look at the second comparison I want to run you guys through today, have a look at this. So this here again is the fiat price of British houses. And we can see that again, it is only trended up and to the right. It has only increased, which is pretty outrageous to think about. But when you actually measure the UK median home price by Bitcoin, you can see it's a very clear trend as well. It's down and to the right. So again, I think this is really good reinforcement that we should all change our denominator. We should change our measuring stick, okay? If you think Bitcoin potentially has the ability to become the next global reserve currency, start pricing your goods and services in Bitcoin today. Preston Pysh actually came out with a really, really interesting insight in a recent interview that is related to this topic. I might play that video for you guys right now.
The person who's looking at the house and saying, I'm up 100%. I'm looking at it and saying that house just got cheaper by 68%. Go back to before COVID. Okay. The January 1st, 2020. Back then, in the town that I live, a middle-class home was around, maybe upper middle class, was around $500,000 to own a house if you were going to buy it. Today, that same exact house goes for $1 million. Okay. It's only been 4 years. 4 years in that house has appreciated. I'm using air quotes here because once you hear the math, this is going to blow your mind. Has appreciated to $1 million. Well, if you're a millennial or you're somebody that's trying to buy a house now, today, and not 4 years ago, listen to this math. That $500,000 house compared to the $1 million house today, because interest rates have changed, because inflation is now manifesting itself. Back then, that $500,000 house you could buy with a 3% interest rate loan. But today, that same house, that $1 million house, is 7%. So guess how much more expensive your monthly payment is on that house from just 4 years ago? It's not twice as much. It's 3.2 times higher than what it was just 4 years ago. So if your monthly payment on this house was, let me see what the numbers are here. Well, I did a net present value instead. So the net present value when the house was 500,000 at 3% was $758,000. Today, the net present value of that house is $2.4 million.
What?
Okay, because it's $1 million at 7%. Okay. Now, here's the thing that's really going to blow your mind. You ready? That house back in 2020, in January of 2020, was 70.2 Bitcoin. Okay. You know what it is with the $1 million in fiat terms, what that house is in Bitcoin today? It's 22 Bitcoin. Okay.
Wow.
So that's a 68% reduction in the price of this house for a person that uses Bitcoin as their unit of account. The house price went down by 68% in the Bitcoiners world, but in the fiat person's world, the price went up by 100%. It's twice as much, right? This is why people can't understand this, because a person who's looking at this that just looks at Bitcoin as being some made up Mario coin internet money is looking at this and saying, oh, if I would have just been able to buy a house back in 2020, I'd have 500,000 bucks. If I levered it, if I levered up, I would have $500,000 in my bank account. Right? That's what the no coiner is telling themselves. They're being rope-a-doped into this old legacy system by the numbers and what they think is increase in buying power. But for the Bitcoiner, they're looking at this and they're saying, I do not want to move from the house that I'm in right now. I don't want to buy the bigger house. I don't want to buy, because the value of this thing is going to get cheaper by 68% every 4 years.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing. And I think the numbers are so the numbers are so lost on people because people don't look at Bitcoin performance in 4-year periods of time. If there's one thing I would highly encourage for you to talk to family and friends about is holding periods under 4 years get more and more speculative as you get further to the left in that timeline. So like if you're talking a month's performance of Bitcoin, it's insanely speculative. Once you get to that 4-year threshold, I don't think it's speculative at all. And the proof in the pudding of that is, you ever see the circular chart with the price, how it never penetrates a previous period of time, 4 years? Yeah. Rational Root has an amazing chart on this. That is the thing that you got to focus on, is a 4-year holding period, because it's truly investment at the 4-year holding period, at least based off of historical performance. And if people can somehow shift their line of thinking to this as their unit of account and holding period, let me tell you, like, your life just starts changing in dramatic ways. Because I'm the person who's looking at that house and saying, I'm up 100%. I'm looking at it and saying that house just got cheaper by 68%.
So I think Preston absolutely crushes it in that video. He's 100% spot on, okay? You really do need to start pricing things in Bitcoin. So that's the first argument or comparison. I think it's pretty obvious that Bitcoin wins that. Economically, it's just the better asset. But what about another comparison, okay? Well, let's actually look at how mobile an asset is, okay? Property, historically, you can't really move it. Once you buy a property, you're stuck there, and it's very difficult to actually, sell that property later on in the piece if you decide to change your mind, okay? They make you go through all sorts of different rules, regulations, paperwork to sell a property. I would actually be surprised if someone could sell one in under 45 days, okay? I've never worked in the industry. I've got a buddy who's a realtor, and he says that the fastest that they can actually sell a property, go through all the paperwork, all of the banking red tape, it takes like 45 days at the minimum, okay? That is obviously in Australia, so take all of that with a grain of salt. But Bitcoin is very different. If you want to sell the Bitcoin, you can sell instantly, okay? Bitcoin is the most liquid asset in the world, okay? It is traded 24/7, 365. And more importantly, you can actually move Bitcoin anywhere around the world you want. You can't move real estate. Once you've bought it, once the house is sat there on the cement block, there's no moving that home, okay? It's very, very immobile. Bitcoin is the complete opposite. It is very mobile, okay? So again, I think Bitcoin wins this, and this is something we do need to consider when we are talking about store values, okay? If you're going to store your wealth in something, you want to be able to actually move it if you change your mind, okay? People are allowed to change their minds, okay? It happens. Take, for example, what happened in Ukraine early in the year. Obviously, terrible disaster. Not going to comment on the politics between Russia and Ukraine, but imagine you owned a Ukrainian home. Well, how valuable is that today? Pretty much overnight, it was rendered valueless, okay? Russia stormed into the country and went to war with Ukraine. And what happened to the value of that real estate? If it didn't get blown up in war, it would be worth essentially zero because there is no demand for the property. Nobody wants to move to Ukraine to buy property now. So again, this is very, very important, and it's actually related to the third thing I want to discuss today. So at the moment, we're 2-0. Bitcoin is 2-zip against property. But let's actually look at another very important variable, and that is government permission, okay? When you're buying a real estate property, you need the bank's permissions. You need the government's permission. You need to pass all sorts of security checks. You need to give them all sorts of identification to buy a property, okay? You essentially have to be good friends with the bank for the next 30 years if that bank is going to give you a mortgage. So again, not everyone can get a mortgage. And again, the exact opposite is true when we start talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is permissionless. Bitcoin is borderless. You don't need to give your identification to someone if you want to buy some Bitcoin, okay? The best way to buy Bitcoin is on the peer-to-peer market, where you just go to a local person, give them some local cash, and they send you some Bitcoin, okay? That's the best way to buy Bitcoin, where you don't have any risks. You don't have any counterparty risks. You're not telling your government whether you own or don't own the Bitcoin. And once again, you don't need permission to do this, okay? Some people, I obviously tell people, you know, go buy Bitcoin peer-to-peer with cash, and you will meet the odd person who says, oh, but isn't that illegal? Isn't that shady? It's like people have been conditioned to believe that going and transacting with someone outside of the traditional legacy system is like illegal or frowned upon or dangerous, okay? Again, don't listen to the propaganda. Go and get yourself some Bitcoin peer-to-peer the way Satoshi intended it, okay? It's on the front page of the white paper. Bitcoin is peer-to-peer electronic cash. And if you haven't sent a peer-to-peer Bitcoin transaction, I would argue that you're missing out on one of the best feelings associated with Bitcoin. If you have it on an exchange, you don't really get that light bulb moment of actually being able to transact and move your wealth whenever you want to, okay? And this is very important when we start talking about the fourth turning, okay? Because most people might think, what are you talking about, Luke? My government and my bank, they've been friendly for the past 20 or 50 years. Why won't they be friendly moving forwards into the future? But regular viewers will actually know that we are in a fourth turning, okay? We are at the conclusion of an 80-year long-term debt cycle. And when our governments have as much debt as they do today, typically they start introducing some very draconian laws. They become a little bit more tyrannical. They raise those taxes. They try to restrict the movement of people outside of their borders so that they can continue taxing them. And this is obviously why we call Bitcoin fourth turning money. So if you want to learn a little bit more about why Bitcoin is fourth turning money, you're in luck, because we did film a video breaking down that insightful 1997 book, The Fourth Turning. If you click on the link right about there, that link is going to take you straight to that video where we break down that entire book in about 15 minutes. So with all that said, hope you guys enjoyed that video. Hope you enjoyed this one. Let us know in the comments what you thought of it. And I hope you guys have a great day and a happy new year.